I still never understand how it is 2026 and we have not developed the technology to accurately forecast the weather. We were supposed to have storms for like 4 to 5 days straight. So I went through all this to prepare my garden for all this torrential rain and not a drop. And then after that, it was like this forecasted like dry, sunny weather. And then we got a downpour of rain. It is May, which means for us here in Texas, especially in the Houston metro area, we are nearing the beginning of the end. And so with that, as we think about things to plant in May, we really want to start to focus on plants that are going to be heat tolerant. And if not thrive, survive the Texas heat, which I don't care what anyone says, is in a league of its own. And so today I'm going to share with you 20 plus crops that you can start today in your Zone 9 garden. And as always, I'll share guidance on whether it's best to transplant, direct sow, as well as tips on how to set your plants up for success from everything from soil prep, fertilizing, and anything else I'll think about along the way. And let's go. The first on the list are going to be our legumes, and that's going to include things like peanuts. Now, I grew peanuts for the first time in my garden last year, and I had amazing success. In fact, Texas is actually one of the largest producers of peanuts in the US. And like most legumes, they're easy to grow and pretty low maintenance. Like most of my legumes, I will just amend the soil with a bit of compost, and because it is embedded in my DNA as a gardener, I will sprinkle in a little bit of a slow release, well balanced organic fertilizer. But a lot of people will tell you this is completely optional. That argument stems from the fact that legumes actually affix nitrogen to the soil. And so by providing them with even more nitrogen, you risk getting all greens. However, I've not had that happen, specifically because I'm using a well-balanced slow release fertilizer, so where all the values in NPK are as close as possible to one another. This year when growing my peanuts, I'm also going to be amending the soil with calcium. I've done a bit of research and supposedly calcium helps to create a larger pods, and so I'm going to give that a try and I will be sure to report back. Next are going to be your southern peas or your cow peas, and that's going to include things like purple hull peas, black eyed peas, crowder peas, and the list goes on. These are incredibly easy to grow. They thrive in the Texas heat. And similar to my peanuts, I will amend the soil with a bit of compost and a little Jersey drizzle of a slow release balanced organic fertilizer. And depending on the variety that you'll be growing, you may or may not need a support. Your legumes are going to be best direct sown. That's because their roots are sensitive to transplant shock. However, if you do have to transplant them, just do so with care. Next are melons, and that's going to include your watermelons, honeydew, cantaloupe, and any other melon you can think about under the sun. Melons grow incredibly well here in Texas. In fact, Hempstead, Texas is known as a watermelon capital of the state. Now, melons prefer a sandy, loamy, loose, well-draining soil. They also need a soil that's incredibly nutrient rich. Because they put on quite a bit of green, they are vining plants. During the earlier stages of the plant's life, nitrogen becomes incredibly important. And so I like to amend my soil with composted chicken manure. That is because composted poultry manure has a higher nitrogen content than other types of compost. Additionally, I will amend the soil with blood meal, bone meal, and a slow release, well-balanced organic fertilizer. And depending on the melon, sometimes I will just let them sprawl out on the ground, or if I'm growing in raised beds, I will provide it with some type of support. And because they put on so much growth throughout the season, I will fertilize every 4 weeks or so with a bit of slow release, well-balanced organic fertilizer. And then depending on the state of the plant will dictate if I will also hit it up with a liquid fertilizer. Biggest difference between a slow release organic fertilizer and a liquid organic fertilizer, as with a slow release fertilizer, it requires the microbes in the soil to break the nutrients down over time so that they become readily available to your plants. Whereas a liquid fertilizer, once applied, the nutrients become available instantly. For your melons, I highly recommend direct sowing because their roots are incredibly sensitive to transplanting. However, if you find that you do need to start your seeds indoors, make sure you transplant with extreme care and you ensure that the roots don't get root bound. Next are your peppers, and peppers are part of the nightshade family, which means they're related to tomatoes, potatoes, and eggplants. And peppers are best transplanted. And peppers are going to prefer a nutrient-rich, loose, well-draining soil. And for my peppers, I am in the soil with compost, blood meal, bone meal, and a slow-release, well-balanced organic fertilizer. However, you can absolutely get away with just using a slow-release, well-balanced organic fertilizer. For my peppers, I will typically fertilize with the slow-release, well-balanced organic fertilizer every 4 to 6 weeks. And depending on the state of my plants, I may also fertilize with a liquid fertilizer in between. Now, peppers will do well with some type of support. They don't vine like something like a tomato, so a bamboo stake or their pole will do just fine. Next is eggplant, and as mentioned, eggplant is part of the nightshade family. And for my eggplants, I just amend my soil with compost and a slow-release, well-balanced organic fertilizer. I'll also fertilize every 4 to 6 weeks. I find that eggplants also aren't as heavy of a feeder like something like a tomato. And similar to your pepper, they will do well with some type of staking or other similar support. I do want to call out, if you are planting any of these things in something like a container, you will find that you may have to fertilize and water a lot more often than if you were planting in a raised bed or in ground. That is because the plant is limited to whatever is able to be contained in your container. And as you water, the nutrients kind of run out through the hole. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Next are sweet potato. Now, I can't say enough great things about growing sweet potatoes. If you live in the South or anywhere hot, there's no reason why you should not be growing sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes, I would call it a weed if I didn't love them so much and eat them so much. They literally have taken over like all throughout my garden. I find random sweet potato vines. So you need to be growing your sweet potatoes. And I know you all have asked on how I start my sweet potato slips, which I don't really have to do anymore because they just come back year after year. But that video is underway. And I just started my sweet potatoes from an actual organic sweet potato from the grocery store. It is incredibly easy. They're incredibly low maintenance. They're heat tolerant. They are drought tolerant. For my sweet potatoes, this is another plant I find if I just set it up right, it does me right for the remainder of the season. I'm in the soil with compost, blood meal, bone meal, and a slow-release, well-balanced organic fertilizer. I do not give it any supplemental feedings throughout the season. That is it. Grow you some sweet potatoes. Next is your squash, and that's going to include both winter and summer squash. Like I said in previous videos, summer and winter squash, the naming has nothing to do with the time of year in which you plant them. You plant them both around the same time. Winter squash has its name because historically it was harvested in the summer, and because of its long shelf life, it was stored and eaten throughout the winter. Now for squash, I just amend the soil with compost and a slow-release, well-balanced organic fertilizer. I've gotten a lot of questions from you all about how I handle or get rid of the squash vine borer. I don't. They're literally the bane of my squash growing existence. And so I find that success is actually in numbers. And so I just continue to succession plant my squash until I have enough to do whatever I want to do. But yeah, they're really bad. I do also go out and inspect my squash regularly, and I will remove them either by using some masking tape, aka like painter's tape, or I will go and squish the eggs, similar to how I will handle squash bugs. Vine borers are so destructive because once the eggs hatch, they bore into the stems of your plants and eat them from the inside out. Additionally, the adult will lay a single egg in various areas of the plant, which makes it near impossible to find them all. Whereas squash bugs, stink bugs, leaf-footed bugs all lay their eggs in clusters, which makes it incredibly easy to spot them and remove them. For my squash, I will fertilize every 4 to 6 weeks, and depending on the state of the plant will determine if I need to hit it with liquid fertilizer. And depending on the variety of squash that you grow will determine if it needs support or not. Next is okra. Y'all know how I feel about okra. I mean, y'all, I swear, some of you all are ride or die for your okra. And y'all have told me all these ways where okra is good. No, I ain't with it, y'all. I can't. But okra does incredibly well here. It is one of those plants that the hotter it gets, the more it puts out, the more it thrives. So if you are a fan of okra, highly recommend growing it. It is also not picky as relates to soil. So there you have it. okra. Next is Roselle hibiscus, which is actually related to okra as well as cotton. And Roselle hibiscus, I have told y'all time and time again, is one of my favorite things to grow in my garden. It is incredibly heat tolerant, incredibly low maintenance. This late in the season, it is absolute best to transplant. That is because Roselle hibiscus requires an incredibly long growing season. I actually checked the seed packet and it said 3 to 4 months until maturity. I find that the more accurate timeline is about 4 to 6 months because typically I will plant my Roselle hibiscus in April or May and they're actually ready to harvest in like October, like September, October. So if you are considering planting Roselle hibiscus this month, just ensure you have enough days left in your growing season. For my Roselle hibiscus, I showed you all how I set it up in my spring planting video. By the way, if you have not seen my spring planting video where I planted over 100 varieties of things, I will link it above and below. And in that video, I share with you how I set my Roselle hibiscus up. I'm in the soil with topsoil, compost, blood meal, bone meal, and a slowly soil balanced organic fertilizer, and that is it. I do not do any other feedings for it throughout the season. So you set it up right and it will do you right. I've gotten several questions on where you can buy Roselle hibiscus here in the Houston metro area. I typically, like I said, start my Roselle hibiscus from seed, but I did go and buy a transplant. I'm going to try planting it in the ground. Typically, I plant my Roselle hibiscus in my raised bed, but this month I'm actually going to plant another one, which I don't need because I find that I'm always overwhelmed with how productive the one in my raised bed is, but I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm gonna be growing one in ground, and I got it from Nelson's Water Garden. I've also seen them at the Arbor Gate here in the Houston Metro. And if you are in need of some leafy greens throughout the season, a lot of the lettuce will start to teeter out during this time of year as temperatures rise. However, you still can try to plant slow bolting, more heat tolerant varieties. However, I found that it's just best to switch over to things like amaranth or perpetual spinach, which is just a type of chard, which y'all know how I feel about chard. It takes the summer, it takes the winters just fine here, and that is typically my go-to green for the summer. Malabar spinach is another green that does really well in the heat. However, it is polarizing because of its slimy texture. It also readily reseeds itself and can have a weed-like habit, so just keep an eye on it. And for my greens, I just amend the soil with compost and a slow release soil balanced organic fertilizer, and I don't find I need to do any other fertilizing throughout the season. Next are your heat-tolerant herbs, and that's going to include things like stevia, lemongrass, basil, ashwagandha, hyssop. The list goes on and on. And for the soil, I just abandon with compost, and that is it. The next are heat tolerant flowers, and I can't stress how important it is to ensure you have constant blooms throughout your garden throughout the season. Some of my favorites include gomphrena, salvia, which is a Texas native, lantana, which is also a Texas native, mistflower, which is another Texas native, milkweed, which is a Texas native, and I also love my zinnias. I wanted to share with you all one more, which is technically a marginal plant because it's really past the optimal time to grow them, and that's tomatoes. So tomatoes, they start to tap out once temperatures are sustained above the 90s for more than a few days, which is all of summer here in Texas. However, there are some ways that you can prolong your growing season. I recommend limiting the varieties that you grow to either terminate varieties of tomatoes or your cherry tomato types. And the terminate varieties tomatoes will put on as many flowers as possible over the course of a few weeks of one another, and then fruit within the course of a few weeks of one another, and then naturally die back. As opposed to indeterminate tomatoes, which grow and grow and grow and grow until heat, disease, or frost, or all three, take it out. Now for your cherry tomatoes, a lot of them are indeterminate. However, because the tomato is a lot smaller, it takes far less energy to produce fruit. If you are going to be growing tomatoes this late in the season, it is a must to provide it with some shade during the hotter part of the day, whether that's with something like burlap, shade cloth, add fabric, or something else along those lines. As a rule of thumb, the eastern facing sun. So that is as the sun rises, it's going to be the lightest and more gentle type of sunlight and the best type of sunlight for virtually almost all of your plants. Whereas the western sun, so where the sun sets, is going to be the harshest sunlight. And so that is the sunlight you want to absolutely shade your plants from during the summer. Actually, most of your plants outside of like okra and hibiscus will do well from shade from the western Texas sun. But as I've shared before in my other videos, tomatoes are incredibly heavy feeders. I am in the soil with compost, bone meal, blood meal, and a slow release well balanced organic fertilizer. I'll go into great detail on how I set my tomatoes up in my spring planting videos, which don't forget to check that out. For my tomatoes, I will fertilize every 4 weeks with a slow release, well balanced organic fertilizer, and I will apply a liquid fertilizer like clockwork every 2 weeks. If you are here in Texas, I hope you are prepping for the beginning of the end and hunkering down for the Texas heat. I'm hoping we don't have too intense of a summer. Here's to hoping. But there's still a ton of things that you can still get out, put out in the garden that can survive the Texas heat. Remember, y'all, progress over perfection. I cannot tell you how many failures I had before I got to where I am today. I always see so many comments about, oh, I wish I could do that, or, I tried, but it didn't work. Y'all, it didn't work for me until it did. So again, give yourself grace, progress over perfection, and be sure to check out my free e-guide that I always link below across all my videos that shares common beginner gardener mistakes and how to avoid them. I also have a spring planting guide that's available on my website that shares tips on when to plant over 50 crops, as well as tips on how to set them up for success. And if you haven't already, don't forget to sign up for my free monthly newsletter where I share gardening tips and tricks every month. Yeah. Love you too, baby. Until next time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. And remember, every black thumb ripens to green, and it all just starts with a seed.